welcome to Sit Still Look Pretty. I'm Priyanka, joining you from the New York City podcast studio. And today I have a very, very exciting guest joining us. But before I do her intro, let me introduce the episode first. So the episode is titled Unboxed in Her Sound, and it really is a reflection of what it means to create without fitting into a mold. So joining me today is Sejal, also known as Sage, a South Asian American artist whose music sits beautifully at the intersection of identity, experimentation, and storytelling. From learning violin at the age of 6 to training in Carnatic vocals to teaching herself music production during the pandemic, Sejal's journey into music has been anything but conventional. Her sound spans across indie rock, pop, and so many other categories that we're going to discuss with her, while weaving in her elements of her South Asian roots in a way that feels both personal and boundary pushing. As an independent artist, she's not just creating music, she's building it from the ground up, if you ask me. So today, we are diving into what it really takes to build your own sound, navigate visibility, and stay true to who you are in a space that doesn't always make room for you. So welcome on board, Sejal.
Thank you. That was amazing. Love that.
I'm so happy to connect with you and to speak with you. I think your music journey was something that really stood out to me. I'm someone who really enjoy music, and at the same time I always feel personally for me, when there's an infusion of our culture, I just feel music is amped up times 10, because it kind of represents you in that way. But before we talk about all those things, I wanna talk a little bit about Sejal growing up with music, because I do know that I read a little about you, and from what I deciphered from the content that I got, you started early. So from the age of 6 was when you were exposed to music. But before that, take me through the young version of you. How did you fall in love with music in general?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that. I'm so excited to be here. I think this is amazing. So very traditionally, my parents were okay, we need you to get to a good college. We didn't immigrate from India to America for you not to get into the best college. So they're okay, college apps, we need you to do everything. One sport, one instrument, start a company, just everything. It's just very much just wanted me to do all these different things. And so they were okay, you're going to play violin. And I was 6 years old, and I'm okay, sure. And I honestly hated it at first because it was so hard, and I'm a child, so it's I don't want to be practicing and doing more work. But I'm really, really happy actually that my parents did push me to do that. For me, it actually wasn't more so about getting all these things for my resume for college or whatever it is, but more so I found this community that I didn't expect. Even as a child, just with the other people that were musicians. And I feel it was so cool to do that, just being the only musician in my family. I think my parents were we have all these opportunities here. Let's see, let's try to get our daughter to do everything and see what sticks, kind of. And that really stuck with me. And I found this beautiful community in orchestra and playing violin, and I actually ended up being able to play all of the stringed instruments. So I play violin, viola, which is my main one, which is a slightly bigger violin, because I always have to be a little different, and then I also play cello and stand-up bass, so I can play all of them. But I really fell in love with the viola because I feel it's kind of a deeper violin, and I found such a great community there.
Tell me a little bit about home, because you did say we moved from India. So tell me bring me through the journey of where you grew up, when did that move happen, and then leading to now, because now you're in New York City. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Where I grew up, I feel it was before it got gentrified by Macy's, but I would say that there wasn't that many people that looked like me around when I grew up, and it was a small town in the Central Valley, which is about an hour from San Francisco. So I didn't really grow up around people people that look like myself or had like similar backgrounds. So I feel like for me, that actually made me want to be more in touch with my culture and who I am and be even more proud of that, you know? I grew up having kids ask me, like, when I would say I was Indian, if it was red or dot. And it was just like so interesting to see like how people had like no exposure, you know? And I think now it's so beautiful to see the new landscape that does exist, especially amongst, you know, South Asians in general, like the representation, because just like growing up and not seeing that and then seeing, oh my God, like now we are dominating so many of these scenes. It's so empowering and beautiful to see. And I think a part of that kind of growing up without seeing that was why I wanted to kind of be the representation that I never saw, because it's not just like that I didn't have people around me that look like me, but it was more so that it wasn't a reality, right? Like, yes, I love that you love to play the violin, Sejal, but like that's for you so you can go study like something useful in college and become a doctor or an engineer, you know? It's not so you could do that for a living, right? Yeah. So it's very much like a means to an end, even though I found so much joy in being an artist and like writing and songwriting and everything from a young age. And so I think for me, I did the traditional path, right? So I studied engineering in college. I studied computer science. I have a very lucrative career in tech right now. So I was an engineer and now I'm a product manager. And I think that being able to do this actually helped me in being more strategic as a creative, because I think it gave me the skills I needed from the business side and to tackle these problems logically, to see it as a reality. And that's why I was able to come to New York, right? So I was in San Francisco, like having my tech career and making connections there. And that's where I actually started to realize there's opportunities now in person post-pandemic to be a creative. And I was like, look, I'm still in my 20s and I love the idea of continuing to grow myself and learn. So what brought me to New York was I started an MBA program, a part-time master's program at NYU. I started actually January last year. That's when I moved to New York as well. And that's also when I started like my arts and entertainment firm, Undefined, and just everything. So it's kind of like brings us to today now.
You went from holding onto a career that is very much like what you say, right? Yeah. It pays the bills. It's something that our parents are proud of. And then came, I think from what I looked up about you, came 2020, I think the year of pandemic, where you went from doing something that is like your passion to doing something that, making the decision that, okay, I'm going to go to New York because this is something I want to pursue. I want to ask you, do you have, it doesn't have to be a story per se, but like a certain incident or something that made you feel like, okay, this is it. This is time for me to kind of pursue it a little bit more seriously. Tell me about that, when that switch happened.
Being in college and having the best time of my life, you know, because for the first time, like I'm getting to, you know, live outside of my home and meeting all these people and like growing into who I am, right? I had such a wonderful time. I went to Cal Poly SLO and I was so incredibly involved with like Greek life and just being in the engineering program. And I love the community that I built there. There's also a really, really strong indie alternative like house scene there. So there's like a lot of artists that come out of San Luis Obispo. And that's actually when I first got exposed. Like I was just like singing at rock shows, like in someone's garage and just meeting all these people and being like, wow, like this is actually something I love to do, you know, like, yeah, like I play the viola and I'm in the orchestra, I'm in the symphony or whatever, but like, come on, I love being able to come out here and just like have this release, right, and this community. And I think I got a taste of that. But then when the pandemic happened, it's like I had to move back home, and then now I'm back where I started. And I felt really, really stagnant to come back to this place where I didn't feel like I could be myself. And the way that I grew up too, right? Like it was just this landscape of where like I felt like I wasn't seen, like being like a South Asian creative. And I think it really made me feel stagnant, right? And at the time, I was actually working at Apple. So I had an internship, which was fully remote. And I was also taking classes and everything. And I was like, okay, wait, so I'm here. I have access to all of the suite of tools, right? Logic Pro, GarageBand are at my fingertips, and I know exactly like how they technically work too. So why not take advantage of that, right? So I was like, okay, I fully just leveraged that suite of products. Like I finished like my tasks, and I'm like, okay, the rest of the day, I'm going to explore the other Apple products. So still relates to work, you know? But I would just experiment, you know, and I'd have fun because anyways, we can't go outside.
Yeah.
Right? We can't go outside. We can only go on walks. And while I was going on walks, I was like listening to so many other indie alternative artists that are experimenting. And I'm like, okay, I was getting inspired. Let me do that too. And I would go on these walks, come back home and try to like figure it out all on my own. I didn't even have a mic at the time. I was recording it on like, do you remember the wired headphones?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would take the mic and I would like sing into the mic there. And it was like in my childhood bedroom and stuff. And I feel like it was just so indie, like so like bedroom pop. And I was like trying to find instrumentalists remotely that I would collaborate with on SoundCloud, be like, yo, I really like this instrumental, like, can you send me stems? And it was just very much so organic in a way for me to like have an outlet because we couldn't go outside. I lost this community that I had having the best time of my life in undergrad, and now it's like I'm stuck at home, and being able to express myself in that way was so cool. And I remember feeling so excited when I first made something. I was like, oh wait, it kind of sounds real, like it sounds like an actual song. And I showed my parents and they were like, this is a good song, like, and I was like, yeah, I made it. And they're like, you made this? And I was like, yeah, I did. And it was just so cool to see, you know, my parents, who I look up to so much, like be able to recognize what I had made as something real, you know, and not just like a hobby for once.
When you first started putting your music out into the world, so you went from like recording and having fun and showing it to your parents to when you putting your music to the world, how was that experience like for you when people listen to it, or like the reactions that like you got? Like what was that like firstly, and like how did you personally take them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I feel like it was actually quite a bit of time from when I first like started making some demos and experimenting and like learning production myself to when I actually released my first single. So I think it was just really not feeling ready yet. I feel like there's still so much I needed to learn and understand. And I remotely actually met my producer over Instagram, which is really interesting because he was based in Paris at the time. And so like everything was remote anyways. And so I had like a friend of mine recommend me to like, hey, like he's really great mastering and mixing. He loves to work with new emerging artists, like hit him up. And so I reached out, and Greg, he's amazing. He really helped me work on this first EP and kind of translated that into what my vision was for my first EP, which is 1/0, which is undefined, which we'll get into later. But like, it means a lot to me, right? Like I've branded myself with this, and it really is how I try to live my life. And so because of that, I was like, okay, just because I made something doesn't mean I need to release it right now, right? It just wasn't the right time. I also feel like there's a lot of like, kind of like, what will people say, right? I think there was a lot of this. Now, if I start releasing music publicly, it's not just like within the confines of my home and with me and my parents and my friends. Now it's the whole world. And I think also being first gen and coming from that more traditional family background where it's like, this is not like an avenue that like I could do for real, right? Because I had a career, a digital footprint. I had to be really strategic about how I wanted to release and what that looked like for me. And so I took some time. I actually moved to San Francisco post-pandemic because I just felt like to be truly creatively myself, I needed to push myself to have my own space, right? And when I moved there, I actually started to work more and more on the EP, and just I would record it. I had this closet, right? It's a very small closet. I would go inside the closet, and I didn't have my own mic yet. At this point, I was like borrowing someone else's random mic off Facebook Marketplace. Like it was nothing like a real structured recording studio. But I would do all of this in my closet, sent it to my producer, who is like in a different time zone. He'd respond right away with the first take. We do so many takes of each one because I just knew anything that I do, just given like my background, I would have to do it like perfectly. And if I was going to do it, I have to be so careful about how I have to do it, right? Because we don't have the privilege of making the mistakes that other people can make sometimes, right? Being like who we are, especially being women of color and coming from these kinds of places where you're making it from scratch, right? Like you don't have you're not a nepo baby, and so it's very much you have to be so careful. And so I wanted it to be perfect. And then I released my first EP in 2023. I think, yeah. And then my first single, I dropped it on the volley of 2023. And that was Going Higher. So that was my first single. And it's my most streamed song. Going Higher to me was just so important because it genuinely is just like the rest of my music about my struggles with anxiety and what it means to like face identity crises and embrace like who you are as a person. And releasing that song while I think I was in India at the time for like my cousin's wedding or something, and then I was releasing it remotely. I just felt like it was so chaotic because it's like I didn't want to tell my family, but at the same time I did, and it was hard to be taken seriously. But then seeing how that first single was received, it just brought me so much validation in that like this is real, like I actually can do this. And just because all of the odds are against me, it doesn't mean that I can't do this. And I can't transparently speak about mental health and my experience through my music, right? Because I'm not just singing about like nothing, right? I'm singing about my actual like story and who I am and my struggles. And so just since then, it's been like kind of ongoing and experimenting with that.
I think the first thing that you said that I found that so true, so apt, and to be honest, I've not heard this in my podcast journey so far, but it's something that people always talk to me like off camera, whereby it's the thing about how we are never given the chance as to like to make a mistake. When we try anything, like it's always like, even a very recent conversation that I had with my friend like over drinks, she was like, because she's from New York herself, and she was like asking me, she was like, I'm curious, as an international person who is living in New York, do you feel like you're always like on the edge because like you can't make a mistake, like you must ensure like your life like sails? And I was like, yeah, but it's just that if I ever sit down and like truly think about it, it will mess with your head in like ways that but it's like so true, like what you're saying, because there's always this like constant pressure over you because you're the first one in your family for like doing music. No one has ever taken that leap. So talk to me a little bit about like the pressure and like how do you think you navigate it in the best way?
Yeah. I think that there's just something to be said about how like we have this pressure, which is hard to quantify, but it's always there, in that we come from these communities where we're so underrepresented in these creative industries, to where the standard is just so much higher. And I think that standard and that bar being so high makes it so that like we have to be perfect, right? And it's also the expectation, right, that like society has too. It's like, okay, if you are calling yourself an artist, that means you have to have achieved something in order to call yourself an artist, where being a creative is like a practice, right? It's not necessarily you just win the Grammy, right? There's the entire journey of how you got there. And I think that people really don't see that sometimes. And I feel like for me, that's kind of what I've struggled with a lot, and what I like to talk about in my work, and what I like to carry with me, like when I perform live, is speak on this, because I think everyone is an artist in some way, right? You could be a finance bro, but in some way there's something that you do in the way that you live your life that is your practice, that is your art, right? And everyone has that. And I think it's about having that respect for what everyone else does and seeing it that way, rather than, oh, I'm a creative and like I am different in some way from you, right? Because I think that's really how I was able to relate with a lot of people in my life that maybe aren't creatives, where it's like, oh, they're like, oh, but you're an artist and you do all these things. And it's like, no, you're an artist in your own way too, in the way that you live your life. And I think with the family being the only one that's doing all these different pursuits, I think for them, it brought them some sort of peace to know that I had stability in my life, because I think a lot of the time that concern comes from this love, right? Like they want to make sure like their daughter has stability, is not doing anything to like, you know, damage her future, right? There's like digital footprint, and there's like all of these things in this scary world that they want to protect me from, and it comes from love. And I think that the way that a lot of us can process it sometimes is like, like they don't support me, or like they're trying to control me, but it really does come from love. And I think understanding that is really what helped me move in the right ways and be so careful about what I did, because like with what I do, I want to make sure I honor where I came from and who brought me here and my legacy, because I want to do it so authentically and intentionally, even with Undefined and what I've built there with Rosewater. I think it's so important to me to be so true to who I am at every moment, and honestly like honor that upbringing, right? Like I might not agree with everything of where I came from, or how things were done, or how like, you know, the parenting techniques, but that's ultimately why I am who I am, right? So all of that, even if I don't agree with it, is why I was able to come to who I am now and create the way that I do. And I think a lot of the time it's tough being in the creative field when you're surrounded, especially in New York City, by so many people who come from connections. Or, you know, like I mentioned, like the Nepo baby concept, where Nepo baby doesn't necessarily mean like it's your family, but also just having that environment around you. And you're kind of trained to go into this path where there's no way that you wouldn't be successful, right?
I truly do feel like these days it's a lot about like, as an artist, is like, okay, what's your numbers, like what's your social media following, what's the amount of like, if you're doing music, what is the streaming number like on your Spotify, like if you're a content creator, how many views are you hitting on like all your social posts. This is what we focus on so much, but everyone starts somewhere, and I feel like sometimes we fail to realize that we all start from like ground zero. But I want to talk a little bit about, like, you mentioned some of like your songs, and as someone who listens to it, I have to say that I really love your music. But I want to know from your perspective, what would you say is like one of like your proudest work, and at the same time, what is one of the tracks that you have done so far that you think is a very good representation about, like, for an example, your life, or something that maybe you feel a little bit like passionate to talk about?
It's Save Me,
okay,
and then Not So Simple.
Okay.
And both of them are like very raw, a lot of like one single take type vocals, and then all of the music is very inspired by The Strokes, Radiohead, very like alternative rock. And then also with Not So Simple, there's like Carnatic fusion where like I have these vocalizations in there. And specifically those vocalizations are so raw because it's coming from this place of like angst, right? So in like traditional like punk and rock music, there's like a lot of like vocals that are very like angsty, and like you're reaching like these emotions and trying to express that through the track, right? And I think I wanted to do that in a way that sounded authentic to me and like my sound, especially being a Carnatic trained vocalist. And I think I managed to do that in this like fusion way where it's like, okay, let's take like The Strokes and make it a little Daisy, you know, and put my own touch to it. And I think also both of the tracks, a lot of the lyrics in Not So Simple, for example, that's a track that I wrote to my family, to my parents, right? Because it's like a way of me expressing like it's not so simple, right? Like it's so hard to explain like this relationship and how it feels to like grow up differently, and like you have this like love and like devotion to your parents, but it's also like you want to live your own life, and it's like this difficult thing that it's hard to explain why I love being creative and why I have to be so different, right? Like you know. And then with Save Me, it's kind of like my kind of plea to the world where it's like I feel like, you know, sometimes it's so hard to be in this world, like you said, of these KPIs. Like even as a creative, like I have KPIs in my corporate life, I have them in business school, and now I have them as a creative. And it's like, what's your engagement rate? Like, you know, and it's just like likes and follows and like all of these fake internet points. But it's like we're literally in a floating rock in space. Like, can we just enjoy being here and like just be present? And I feel like Save Me is kind of like my plea to the audience of just being like, yo, like it's so hard out here and it's tough. Like I don't know if like anyone can see me, you know, like I want to be seen. And I feel like it's an echo chamber where it's like you make it as an artist after you go viral like once or twice, and then you have your like 5 seconds of fame, or you have your one track that did well, or, you know, it's just like this lifestyle of having to appeal to people who are just consuming content, right? Versus creating like you. And there's always some algorithm that you're trying to appeal to. And I reject all of that because I think, yeah, it might take me a longer time. It might be slower. My numbers might not be as high, but I will never sacrifice the integrity of who I am and the intentionality behind what I do as a creative. This is a whole nother topic we can get into. I could spill the tea, but I feel like sometimes other artists of color, other South Asian artists, they're not your friends, or they're trying to compete with you, right? And it's just like,
so well said.
There's so much to say on this, but it's just like, I feel like everyone throws around this word community this, community that, but is it community? Right? Are you actually there for your community, or are you just there because you want the attention in the moment, or you want to profit off of your culture in the moment, right? Because I think true community is actually creating those opportunities and talking to everyone, trying to see how you can find a place for everyone who wants to be involved, because that's how we create grassroots events. And that's how Rosewater got to be as successful as it was, because I went on the internet, I told my story, and I had thousands of people messaging me, DMing me, emailing me, and I went through every single one.
Wow.
I went through every single one, and I tried to find some way to respond to them within reason, right? Like if you respond to me with a couple words, guys, come on, like, you got to give me a little bit more than that. But within reason, I went through and I found a place for everyone, and tried to see, okay, you want to get involved? How can I connect with you? How can I find someone else to connect you with that I might know, you know, and create this network of community. And I saw that, right? Because I wanted to create the spaces that I felt like were gate kept. So I was trying to actively ungatekeep them by making those spaces, right? You can't change institutions. You can't change a lot of people. And I think there's a lot of clickiness that exists in the South Asian creative community, even today. And that's okay. Sometimes there's a reason there's clickiness. We want to protect our safe spaces, right? But I was like, let's do this a little differently, right? Because I was like, okay, I don't have the numbers and everything. And some of the artists that I book or that I work with don't have numbers or whatever that people look for sometimes. But I'm like, they still deserve to perform at this world-renowned venue. They still deserve to be headlining because that's how they're going to get the opportunity to be seen. That's how they're going to get to be discovered because that's how it used to work before the age of TikTokification, right? You would take a chance on someone, right? And you would see them grow and be there to build that growth. That's what it means to like create community.
So many good points raised against it. Like, I don't even know where to get started at this point. I really, really loved the point that you raised about how it's so important to you to be authentic in your own terms. That is something that I always stand by, even in my own life. It's like what you say, it might take 10 years for us to grow, but I would gladly walk down that path. So that's one thing that I loved that you talk about. The next thing that you talk about is something that we definitely need to talk about, which is how it's so true, because we are always talking about like, I come from this community, I'm so proud of it, like I'm so proud of like which I continue to be. I think that's the same for you. But many a times it's so sad, and something that I think we should talk about is, do we really elevate each other, or are we like tearing down each other? And if we are tearing down each other, it's something that I think we should reflect about. Like something that I always try to do and I'm very strict about is, when I started this podcast, I was like, only brown people on this podcast because that's my way of supporting them. But on the counter perspective, when I initially started this, I want you to know that back in Singapore, this was done in like Tamil. And then I made the switch for it to be like in English, because many a time, not all brown creators can speak Tamil language, right? Like people speak Hindi and everything. And I'm like, but they still deserve to be on the podcast. I still want to talk to these people. And one of the greatest criticism that I got, and I am well aware about till date, is the way I was like, how could your podcast not be in Tamil? Because that's where you started. So I can kind of relate to what you're saying, because how much of us do we put out, and like what we get in return, do we really deserve it? That kind of a thing. So I loved that point that like you brought it up.
There's always going to be critics, right? It's like, oh, it's not this enough, or it's not that enough. Well, how about you just do it, you know? And I think that's kind of why I started to do everything, right? And so many things at once, because I'm like, everyone loves to be a critic and give advice, but when you actually do the damn thing, then you see how difficult it can be, and you can't try to appeal to everyone, right? You can only do the best in what your capacity is. And it's not like I'm going to sit here and be like, oh, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I have like this perfect timetable and this like structured lifestyle. I don't, right? I watch a lot of these day in the life, or like these content creators. And it's, I know. Cause you can't look away. You're like, oh my God, like these people like have their life together. And then it's like, think about like they have set up a camera to record themselves doing it, right? In my real life, like there's times where I'm like rolling out of bed because I'm running late to a meeting, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm just like chaotic.
So true. There
are moments where I am literally like staying up late night doom scrolling, being like, why am I not enough? But then I'm like, you know, but then there's moments where I'm like, oh, like I'm doing everything right. Like I'm like have this great like group of people around me, and I feel so motivated. So there's like ebbs and flows, right? And I'm not going to like sit here and act like it's perfect, because it's not. And I think people don't talk about that enough, and people are not vulnerable enough about it, because it builds this false sense of reality where now everyone wants to be a founder, right? Everyone wants to be an independent artist. And I love that. And I love that it is accessible. But I think people need to talk more about the realities of what that means. And it's not as perfect as it seems, right? It's difficult because I feel like jack of all trades, master of none sometimes, where it's like, I want to excel in my corporate career because then if I excel in my corporate career, I'll have more funds to do all the other things I want to do in my life, right? I'll have more independence in order to like do that, right? But it's like, I want to excel in that. But also if I want to excel in that, I need to allocate so much mental capacity into that, and it already does take up a lot of my time, right? And then with being a creative, right, that's something that's a lifestyle, right? It's a practice. It's something that you have to do every day, and every part of your life seeps into what that means. So it's like so all encompassing. And then I have school, so then it's like, you have finals and deadlines, and with all of these different things, you're surrounded by so many other people, and I'm such an energy person. So I feel like I'm very much like affected by the energy of those around me, and it's just like I have all these quarterly KPIs and deadlines in my corporate life and with business school. And then I also feel like it's very similar though, because when you're running like a creative enterprise like I am, it's like there's a lot of deadlines there too, especially with working in large scale events and working with multiple artists. When I first moved here last year, I was doing so much. Like every venue I performed at, I went on tour last year, and I also did the festival. I did like over 10 events and like partnered with so many people, and that's amazing and great, and I'm very happy I did that. But I was so burnt out. I was so miserable, honestly, because it's like the high highs and the low lows, right? I'm doing all these cool things, but I'm getting sick all the time, right? Because my body can't handle how much I'm putting myself through. And it's like, you have to also understand, it's like, you're only physically capable of so much. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. They just talk about like what the success looks like. And it looks so cool to like be doing all these things and what you see on social media. But the reality of it is that it's very difficult, right? You need to make sure you get enough sleep. That when you're around these nightlife spaces, like these are late night activities, right? When I'm DJing, I'm late night slot, right? And it's just like a very, very tough, because then I have to wake up in the morning for a meeting the next day, right? So I joke and tell people, I don't sleep. And that only got me so far to where it's like, no, I have to prioritize sleep. I have to prioritize my gym time. I need to make sure that I eat, right? Because when you're running events and when you're performing, we don't eat. I know we're not eating, okay? And it's really interesting. It's just like learning to love yourself. And I think that social media is so toxic that what I had to do is I had to just take it off. I literally had to take it off. I had to mute things that I couldn't see and just really curate my feed to be what I needed to see at the time. And I think that that's really helped me. And what I've been focusing a lot on this year is just like making sure that I don't just see everything and say yes to everything, but I'm very intentional about what I can take on, because then I can give it my full 100%.
I think the city is such that you are surrounded with people who are so busy. So you look at yourself, you naturally become busy. I don't know how it happens, but it just happens in the city. Like I'm like, I have to, it's like what you say, if I don't write down on my Google Calendar break, I just feel like that's not going to happen. So when I started, like I moved last year. So this year, one of my goal to myself was, I don't care like what goes on, you have to take yourself like to your workout classes, like once a week, bare minimum. You have to step out and like walk. And these are things that I had to insert inside. It's like what you say, because you are so busy, and then at the end of the whole journey, you're burnt out. You're supposed to prioritize yourself, your sleep, your food. I still do so badly in terms of food, if I be honest. Like even yesterday, my mom was like, so what did you eat for lunch? I was like, nothing. And she was like, nothing. I was like, I had no time. But that is not an excuse,
I know. I have the same conversations with my mom. She's like, Sejal. And I'm like, I know. And it's like, it's fine though, because I think it's good that we have these people to hold us accountable, right? Like whether it's friends or your parents, like talking about it and being transparent about it is so helpful, because it's not all perfect. Some days you're going to forget to eat. Some days you won't have time to go to your workout class, and you're going to feel really guilty and bad about it, but that's okay, because it's just a reminder, right? We're constantly improving. And I think like it's just so hard to put so much pressure on yourself all the time. It's also like, take some time to be like, yo, we're out here doing our ancestors' dream. we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, right?
Yeah.
Let's just be like happy that we're here right now, you know?
Yeah. So well said. And before I wrap up with the final question, I think people will hold me accountable if I invited you here and I didn't make you like sing like a few lines for us. So it can be your favorite or anything like a upcoming track that you're working on, if you want to give us like a little hint, but anything, like take it away with a few lines for us.
Going Higher starts like this. Only you could make me feel like this. Warm weather making me think of your kisses. It's hard to believe it's here. This moment I'll wait in fear. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And I feel like it's just taking like a moment and just trying to find like that peace within you, right? And just understanding only you have control of how you're feeling, you know?
Loved it. Thank you so much for that. One final question that we're going to end off with today. What's next for you? Or even if sometimes people tell me like I haven't really thought about what's next for me, if that's the case, then what are you excited about then? So anything that you're working on or something that is going to be coming up?
Yes. So I think there will be another Rosewater. I'm working on the next one. I just want to be so intentional and careful about how I do it. I want to make sure it's just as beautiful and wonderful as the last one, which I'm so, so grateful for the success that came with that, and just filling public records with so much beautiful people that came out to support the community and throwing this benefit that was just uplifting so many diasporic communities. And it's like showing the true melting pot that New York City is, while giving back to the city that I'm so grateful to be in. And so I think I want to just make it more larger scale. So just see how I can scale up and also make sure that I continue to provide opportunities for talent to be seen, right? Provide these stages for them to finally like be the headliners and have like an excellent space to practice their craft. And then personally as an artist, like continue to refine like my songwriting and make sure that whatever I release next is true to who I am and something that I feel like reflects where I'm at in my creative journey.
Love that for you. Wishing you so many more success, and I'm really excited for the journey ahead. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to you guys who are listening, and I would join you guys back with Priya actually in the next episode back in Singapore, so stay tuned for that. And thank you for listening to Sit Still Look Pretty.